that you get in winning a chess game is that you want to win and you get what you want. It's wanting to win that gives you the opportunity to have a pleasure. If you didn't want to win, there wouldn't be any pleasure. There, the desire comes first and the pleasure comes afterwards.
And that's not selfish.
It may or may not be, but the point I'm making is that you cannot simply say, I want it because I get pleasure. That's sometimes true and sometimes false. Sometimes you get pleasure because you want, not the other way around.
Sometimes you get pleasure because you want, and sometimes you want, and therefore you get pleasure.
That's right.
So when I want, and therefore I get pleasure...
Well, the therefore is tricky. It depends on what you mean. So a person who enjoys ice cream typically enjoys ice cream even if he doesn't want it.
How does that work?
Take the child's first taste of ice cream.
He likes it.
He has no desire for it, doesn't know what it is. When you touch the spoon to his mouth, he's wary, he's suspicious, he's reluctant until he tastes it and then he enjoys it. That pleasure is not the result of satisfying a desire. There is no desire there.
The desire is to taste something good, to eat something good. He thinks he
has no desire at all. He may be stuffed. He has no desire whatsoever. It's a thing that feels good because of the way you're hardwired. But playing chess is not like that. If you didn't want to win the chess game, you wouldn't have any pleasure in winning it. That's not true with ice cream. You could say, I don't want it, I've had it too much, I'm bored with it, and so on and so on. It'll still taste good. So, tasting good, the enjoyment of ice cream is hardwired into the organism. And there are some things that you enjoy because they satisfy your desires. If you didn't have the desire, there wouldn't be any pleasure available at all.
So if I work on my wanting, and I want something good, and then therefore I do the thing good, that's not a selfish act.
By good now you mean objectively good, something that's just, something that...
I like feeding the cat.
Right, and you get pleasure out of feeding the cat because you desire to feed the cat. It makes you feel good because it satisfies your desire to feed the cat. Making you feel good is a result. It's not the cause. It's not what you're after. It's a result.
So as long as it's a result, then it's not selfish.
That's correct. A tzaddik, a righteous person, a holy person, has a life full of pleasure. It's a life full of pleasure because he wants to get close to God, because God wants him to get close to God. He wants to do things that are right, and he succeeds in doing things that are right, and he gets what he wants. And because he gets what he wants, it's a life full of pleasure. But what he wants is things that are good. He wants things that are just. He wants things that are right. He wants things that are beneficial to others. You don't become a tzaddik by forswearing all pleasure and living a life of misery. That's not what a tzaddik is. The question is not whether you have pleasure. The question is what produces the pleasure. In particular, is the pleasure produced by my desire for my own pleasure, or is the pleasure produced by my desire for justice, my desire for loving kindness, my desire for the expansion of human capacities, and I work hard on it, and I succeed at it, and then I get what I want. This is an old thing. It was clarified in philosophy 200 years ago by Bishop Butler of England. I just spoke about it the other night and spoke about it for an hour. I'll just give you one example, and then maybe I'll leave it for now. There is, in the philosophy books, it's probably a false parable. There's a parable of Abe Lincoln, who was taking the position of the cynic that everything you do only because you do it for yourself, for your benefit, for your pleasure. And he's riding in a wagon with a friend who's horrified to hear him say this. And as they're driving along, they come to a bridge over a bog, and trapped in the bog are some baby pigs, and the baby pigs are squealing. So Lincoln tells the wagon driver to stop, and he gets out, and he wades out into the bog, into the mud, and he frees the baby pigs and sets them on the bank. He gets back in the wagon, driving along, and his friend says, Abe, I don't get you. You're just telling me that you do everything for your own pleasure, everything you do for your own benefit, and you freed the squealing pigs from the bog. How do you reconcile that? Now, Lincoln says, well, I happen to feel terrific because I freed those fellow creatures from a distress. And if I had to go home tonight without freeing them, I would have been hounded by my conscience, and I would have felt terrible about the fact that I didn't free creatures in distress. So, it's my pleasure and avoidance of my pain. That's his argument. He's wrong, because contrast him with someone else. There are other people who go straight by and wouldn't bother them at all. They would take notice. They wouldn't have any pangs of conscience. They wouldn't feel any. And if somebody put a gun to that person's head and said, "You must free the pigs," he'd have hated every minute of it. What's the difference between Lincoln, who gets a pleasure out of freeing them and would feel guilty if he didn't, versus the person who would pass them by with no thought, and if you force him to do it, feels terrible. What's the difference? The difference is that Lincoln is committed to helping creatures in distress, and the other guy isn't. Lincoln's committed to doing it. He wants to do it. He desires to do it. When he succeeds in freeing them, he gets what he wants. That's where his pleasure comes from. If he passed them by and didn't, he would feel stricken because he didn't do what he wants to do. The other guy has different desires. The other guy doesn't care that creatures are in distress, doesn't bother him, and if he's forced to free them, that goes against his desires. The difference between Lincoln and the other guy is where his desires start. They determine what his pleasures will be. And the desire is the desire to help creatures in pain. That's the desire. Desire is not to get pleasure. The pleasure wouldn't be there if you didn't have the desire to start with. The desire comes first, pleasure comes afterwards. Without that desire, there is no pleasure available.
So in your definition, Lincoln is in that situation, would be the definition of not selfishness.
The selfishness depends upon what you desire. It depends on what you desire. If you desire your own benefit, your own pleasure, you're selfish. If you desire the benefit of others, you're not selfish. Depends upon what the object of your desire is.
So if I'm doing something because I want eternal reward, that's selfish?
That may be, yes, that's right. That's why it's the lowest level of service. The lowest level of service is considered childish and immature to serve a Kodesh Baruch Hu for reward, because it means I don't have any appreciation for the objective value of this thing. I think only in terms of it as a means to my own benefit. That's why the highest level of service is the Shmo. Shmo means it's worth it, as the Rambam writes, even if there were no world to come, even if I weren't going to get any reward for it, I would do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. It's the thing that needs to be done. That's not selfish. I'll get pleasure from it. Because I'll succeed in doing what I want to do. So I'll get pleasure from it. That doesn't make it selfish.
So if I enjoy learning and I'm learning because I enjoy it,
then you're serving yourself. If you're learning because you enjoy it. But if you are dedicated to finding out God's will for the universe, and you're making progress, and that gives you joy that you're finding out God's will, the joy doesn't make it selfish, because the joy is a byproduct. It's not the goal. I'll give you a brutal example. About 10 years ago, the Mississippi overflowed in the United States, and a lot of cities around the route were flooded. Some of them were building sandbag walls to hold back the water. So here's my example. George is living in Santa Monica, and he's reading about this. Sorry, I'm in the wrong century. He's watching it on television, so people don't read anymore. And he's seeing this. He's horrified, and he plots and says, oh, in a week it's going to get to there. I'm going to go and help them build the sandbag wall. Gets in his car, drives for 36 hours, and it goes and it's dragging 100-pound bags of sand to make the sandbag wall. And he does that for 5 days. Then he goes home. 2 months later, he's telling a friend about his experience. His friend says to him, tell me something. You spent 5 days dragging 100-pound bags of sand. Do you think that you increased your muscular strength thereby? 5 days dragging 100? I'm sure I got stronger. Then that's why you did it, and you're really selfish. Excuse me? That's dumb. He didn't even think about it. It's a benefit. It's a byproduct of what he did. He wanted to help them, and in helping them, he happened to benefit his muscles. That doesn't make him selfish. That's a byproduct benefit. The fact that you get a benefit doesn't mean you are selfish. It doesn't what you're trying to do. That's what your goal is and what you're trying to do. You're only selfish if your goal is your own benefit. The fact that you have a goal to do X and you get a benefit from doing that does not mean that you're selfish. And happiness, the true servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is happy because he's doing the most important thing in the world. Talk to neurosurgeons, talk to great scientists or great mathematicians who are discovering new things. Right? They're not doing it for pleasure. They have a great desire to understand how the world works. When they make progress in doing that, they get what they want. Because they get what they want, they're very happy.
So if someone works on himself to the extent that he actually enjoys learning, and he hopes the next time he's opening a sefer, he's not thinking that he's understanding the secrets of the universe, but he's doing it because he just enjoys it. He enjoys the pleasure of learning new things.
Let me tell you something. I went to South Africa the first time. I've been there maybe 10, 15 times. I can't keep track anymore. First time I went there was 34 years ago. I was told about a Talmud study group that was popular in Johannesburg, a weekly study group. These were immigrants from Lithuania, for whom Talmud study was, top intellectual thing. They came from all over the city, that once a week, and they spent a couple of hours learning Talmud. every Saturday afternoon. They drove from all over the city Saturday afternoon because they enjoyed learning Talmud together. And they enjoyed it. They got a real kick out of it. The svaras and the analysis and the arguments back and forth. They're learning it because they enjoyed it. It had no spiritual value whatsoever. None. Zero. They weren't keeping the laws of Shabbos. They were just there because of the intellectual pleasure. That's not even a mitzvah. The mitzvah, the minimum for a mitzvah requires, I know that God commanded me to do it, and I intend that what I'm doing fulfill His command. That's mitzvah shvichas kavanah. Without that, you don't satisfy the mitzvah at all. They weren't even satisfying the mitzvah, let alone doing it for its own sake or doing it selfishly or unselfishly. In that case, they weren't satisfying the mitzvah at all. A person can intend that it satisfy God's law, but his motivation for doing it is that I get something out of it. So let's say people respect and honor and give money and power to those who come early for davening. So this guy comes early. He wants the money, he wants the respect, he wants the honor, right? And that's why he comes early. He still is fulfilling the mitzvah of davening, but his motivation is purely selfish, and that is the lowest possible level of service. It's childish, it's immature, because doesn't appreciate the importance of the thing that he's doing.
Okay, again, so without the Shem Yichud before doing the mitzvah, and you're doing the mitzvah.
Another example. Imagine a person who's very talented. He could be a very gifted neurosurgeon, or he's got a great eye for driftwood. He walks the beaches and he looks for driftwood. He can find very interesting pieces of driftwood. And he can do either one. He can make money either way. So he thinks, what should I do with my life? You know, if I can do either one, I'll flip a coin. That person is a criminal. Because a gifted neurosurgeon is going to save people's lives. He's going to restore people's function. Collecting driftwood is trivial. He flips a coin. That means to him, saving lives and collecting driftwood is on a par. Then he's a monster. He's a monster. Saving lives isn't worth any more intrinsically than collecting driftwood. He's a monster. And the question is what you want, what you value, what you're going after. What you're going after is your own pleasure. You're doing the mitzvah, and God said to do it, and you want the pleasure, the reward that you're going to get out of it. It counts. You get a check off, and you will be rewarded, but it is considered to be childish, just as we motivate children. You want a child to play the violin, you got to motivate him by giving him a reward, because when a child starts to play the violin, all you get is noise. It's not like the piano where you press a button and you get a tone. The violin is awful. It sounds awful for a couple of years. Then when the child gets to play music, it's different. But in the meantime, you've got to give him an external incentive till he grows and matures and understands he's playing music. You hope that a person serving God grows and matures to the point where he understands that doing the will of the creator of the universe is more important than my ice cream cone.
So when he started off and doing it because he wanted to do the will of the creator of the universe, and then he grows into a position that he likes it, he doesn't lose, and on a metaphysical level, he's not losing the schar that he gets in the beginning.
Because he's not doing it because he likes it.
He started off not, but today when he's doing it because he likes it.
You didn't listen to me. Oh no! First you said he grows to the point where he likes it. Now you say he's doing it because he likes it. But that's not growth. That's regression. That's regression.
They tell a famous story of Rosh Shiva. I forgot who when he was sitting Shiva, he couldn't hold himself back from learning.
Yeah.
How do you understand that?
The Gemara talks about it. The Gemara says that you're not supposed to think about learning in the Beis HaMerchatz, in the bathhouse, right? And one of the Amoraim went in, and he was thinking about it, and they asked him about it, he said, I can't help it. I can't help it. Rabbi Soloveitchik, from whom I had the privilege to study for many years, talked about his grandfather, and he said, on Tisha B'Av, his grandfather was saying Torah, because if he didn't say Torah, he would die. There are people who are what's called onus in the Gemara. They just can't help it. It's not ideal. Ideal would be to have greater self-control than that. But I wish that were my problem. I wish that, this is the thing I couldn't control. I couldn't control my involvement in Torah to the point to cut it off at the times when you shouldn't be involved in things. But it would be better. Ben Asai, who either didn't get married or got married and got divorced, because Torah, that's considered to be second rate. That's not top rate. He was honest. He couldn't help it.
So again, as long as the point of want and the reason why you want is for an outside motive, outside of yourself, then that's not selfish.
Indeed, the Nefesh HaChaim and others say in the beginning of the Mesilas Yesharim, it says a person has to know what his obligation is in the world. His obligation is to act in such a way as to get to the world to come. That's his obligation. Notice, it's not a matter of motivation, it's his obligation. Why is that his obligation? Because that's what God wants. His aiming for the world to come, which is his greatest possible reward and pleasure. Yes, but why does he want to go to the world to come? Because he wants me there. That's why I want to go, because he wants me there. I'm going where he wants. He wants me there, so I want to go there, because he wants it. That's okay, because the because is on him, not on me. True, I'm going to get a tremendous benefit from it, but the cause is on him, not on me. My example, a homely example, is mother asks a child what he wants to eat. 8-year-old. He thinks to himself, what I want to eat. My mother gets tremendous pleasure when I enjoy the food. So I'm going to ask for the food that I like best so that my mother will enjoy my pleasure. There could be such a thing. So he's asking for the thing he likes best. But why is he asking for the thing he likes best? Because he wants to give his mother the pleasure of enjoying his pleasure. That's what we're talking about. By the way, the Nefesh Chaim says, what is real fear of sin? It's the same point coming from the opposite direction. What is real fear of sin? Not that you're going to suffer, not that you're dirtying your soul, not that you're going to be distant from God. The real fear of sin is that my sin causes God pain. I can't stand that thought. The thought that my action should cause God pain, God's pain is something I can't bear. That's being involved in him. My focus, my screen is filled with him. My care is for him. Do I care about myself? Only because he cares about me. I get into the screen only because I'm an object of his care. If I were an object of his care, I wouldn't care about myself either. All I care about is him. Surprise, surprise, he happens to care about me. Surprise, surprise, he wants me to have the greatest pleasure in the world to come. Okay, so if he wants that, then I want it too because he wants it. But my want is determined by him, not by myself. Just ends up happening to result in pleasure of myself. That's why it's not selfish. Selfishness is determined by the goal of your action, not by whether or not you get pleasure in the action. Anyway, this is a standard subject in philosophy. One of the things I used to teach. When I used to teach. Yeah. You have any questions?
No, just two things. Just when Rob was just mentioning about by the way that Nefesh Chaim is Magdir, Yiras Achrit.
Yeah.
And the first two levels that were just mentioned were really Yiras Onish. Huh?
Yeah, but I mean, people talk about Yiras Achrit in those terms, right? And he says that's not really what it is.
Oh, because I remember the Ramchal says that Yiras Achrit, like he mocks that and is Magdir.
That's right. Sure, he mocks that. Of course not. But I mean, he's playing it off with the way people talk, and people do talk about it that way. And his definition is higher, I think. I don't know if anyone else takes that definition. You're causing pain to the Shekhinah. That's what you're. My example that I use for the Talmudim is: imagine that you're connected by an electric circuit to an 18-month-old baby, whereby every bite of the bacon cheeseburger is going to cause him a jolt of electricity, and you're going to hear him scream. Could you eat it? Not if you're normal. You couldn't possibly do it. How could I cause pain to an 18-month-old baby? I couldn't do that. Now, you can imagine a person who's so orangutans, we say, he's so involved psychologically with the Shekhinah, with God's presence, and he pictures the pain that he's giving to God when he does that. He says, I can't do it. I just can't do it. That's real fear of sin. It's displaced from yourself altogether. Not your punishment, and not your dirtying yourself, and not your distancing yourself from God. That's all about you. This is about God.
That's the level of Ava.
Yes, that's the level of Av. That's the idea of, that's what the Rambam says in Perek Yud of Hilchos Shiva, where he defines the Schmo. He says, doing it out of love for the Creator who commanded it. Doing it out of love for the Creator who commanded it. In love, it's a good example. Love is a good example. When you do something for someone you love, do you get pleasure out of that? Of course you get pleasure out of that. You give a present, you do a favor, you say a nice word, and you see the other person smile. Of course you get pleasure. Are you calculating? Oh, if I do that, she'll smile. If she'll smile, I'll feel good. So I'm really doing it to feel good? Of course not. You're doing it because you want the other person to feel good, because you want the other person to be happy, because you want the other person to develop and flourish. Of course you get pleasure out of it. You love the person and you're expressing your love. That's a pleasure, but the pleasure is a byproduct of wanting and succeeding that the other person should have it good.
Well, there's also dependent relationships, no?
Sorry?
There's also dependent relationships, meaning that like sometimes you have a husband walks into your house, and when the wife is upset, so he can't take me. He's upset in the emotion that she's upset.
Yes.
So there can be an ulterior motive to making her, to giving her a smile, telling her how nice she looks.
Well, I don't say
You yourself can't take that pain. You know?
there can be. Let's understand where the dialectic that we're dealing with now. We are considering a position which is a universal position. Everything you always do is only solely for your own pleasure and benefit. To take issue with that position, you need one example against. That's all. You need to show that sometimes what you do is not for your own benefit. No one's denying that we have selfish tendencies. No one's denying that we have ulterior motives often. No one's denying that we do things for ourselves and even at the expense of other people. We have mixed psychology. But the person we're taking issue with takes a universal position that everything is always only for the sake of your own benefit. Selfishness rules all. Right? That's what I'm arguing, that that's a mistake. But sometimes there are ulterior motives. By the way, there's a Hasidic Shemaisa of there were people in Europe. It's an extreme position, but there were responsible people who did it, people who gave away everything. They gave away everything. They would not go to sleep if there were any money in the house. They just gave everything away. There was one such Hasidic Rabbi who did that for years. Then, at one point, he stopped, and he didn't give anything for months. He didn't give any charity, nothing. A few months later, he started again. So his Rabbi, his personal secretary, asked him what happened. And he said, just like you said, he said, I found, a person came to me and he asked me for help, and he poured out his tale of woe in front of me. I was so overwhelmed with empathy. I was so broken by his suffering. I couldn't help but give him the money. That's not the right way to give charity. It's never right that your emotions should be out of control and rule your action. Emotions are important to sensitize you to the reality you're dealing with, but their emotions should not dictate your action. So I realized I had to get control. So I decided to put an end to it for a few months. That's the Rome in Hilchos Deos. And then when I realized I had control, then I could go back and empathize and feel the pain and decide what has to be given and what has not to be given. That's the idea. It shouldn't be driven that way. I just can't take what I'm seeing. There was a nasty description of that in my day politically, called the bleeding heart liberal. Those are the jokes that you make at the expense of liberals. You know, if you're 20 and you're not a liberal, you don't have a heart. And if you're 30 and you're still a liberal, you have no brain.
So according to your definition, comes that there is altruism in this world.
Yes, of course there's altruism in this world. Of course there's altruism in this world. There's altruism, there's selfishness, there are gradations between, there's mixed motivation. There are things that you want which are neither altruistic nor selfish. They're simply things you would like to see happen. It's not because it'll make anybody else's life better, and not because I'll get any pleasure out of it. Just things I would like to see happen. You know, they don't have to be driven by altruistic or selfish motives. It's just a question of the things that people want. And I don't think anyone who wants to put an artificial limitation and say all desires are like this or all desires are like that, he owes us a good, solid argument. Otherwise, look at life, look at your own experience, look at the experience of others, and you see that it's very widely variegated. You read the lives of great scientists or great composers. Some of them suffer terribly. Einstein spent years of suffering. He was struggling with an idea that we have notebooks of his. We crossed out pages after pages of calculations. And he said developing general relativity was one of the most difficult periods of his life. And he said, only someone who's been through the struggle and the failures and the frustration and the pain can understand the joy of finally making the success. And there's no guarantee that he would succeed. But he was driven to understand how the world works. Beethoven spent the last years of his life deaf. You have a composer who's composing the most sublime music and he can't hear it. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Listen to the Beethoven symphonies. I'm a musician, so the late Beethoven quartets, the violin setups. Imagine him Now, of course, he can sort of hear it in his head, but he can't hear the music. Lahavdil, Rav Gifter, towards the end of his life, had no short-term memory. I know because I wrote a sefer, and I wanted him to give haskama. I sent it to the people who were close to him, and they said that they were very sorry, but he'll learn a daf Gemara in the morning. By the afternoon, he will have forgotten it. So he's in the daf over and over and over again because he has no short-term memory whatsoever. He won't be able to read through the book and remember what he read. So I didn't get haskama from him. Can you imagine what it means to be a scholar and have no short-term memory? Know that you're reading the same thing over again and not realizing that you can't hold on to it. It's very, very, very difficult.